Run! Mirabelle screamed, her small legs pumping so hard her shoes barely touched the ground. She didn't look back. She couldn't, because if she did, she would see how close they were. 3 men. Big. Fast. And they were gaining on her. She cut through the alley, legs shaking, tears streaming down her face. She didn't know where she was going. She just ran. And then she crashed hard into someone standing completely still in the middle of the path. Mirabelle stumbled back and looked up. A woman. Tall. Calm. Dark-skinned, with a white cane resting lightly in her hand and dark glasses sitting across her face. Blind. Please, Mirabelle gasped, grabbing her arm. Please, they're coming. The woman didn't move. Didn't flinch. Didn't even turn her head. The 3 men slowed when they spotted her. Then one of them laughed. A low, ugly sound. Move, lady, the first man said, cracking his knuckles. This doesn't concern you. Julie's head tilted slightly to the left, like she was listening to something only she could hear. The first man stepped forward towards. But then everything happened fast. So fast that Mirabelle barely processed it. 1 second Julie was standing still. The next, the first man was face down on the ground, his arm twisted behind his back at an angle that made Mirabelle wince. The second man lunged at her. Julie dropped low, pivoted on 1 foot, and drove her elbow into his ribs so hard the sound echoed off the alley walls. He crumpled. The third man pulled a knife. He hesitated for just 1 second, looking at his 2 friends on the ground. That 1 second was enough. Julie stepped forward and he went down too. Silence. Mirabelle stood there, mouth open, staring at the 3 men groaning on the concrete. Then she looked at Julie, who was straightening her jacket like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just taken apart 3 grown men in under 30 seconds. Are you hurt? Julie asked, turning toward Mirabelle with carefulness. Not looking at her. Looking slightly past her. But still somehow facing her. I know, Mirabelle whispered. How did you're blind, Julie said, a small smile curling up at her lips. Yes. Come. Stand behind me.
Hello beautiful family, welcome back to Moon Soul Stories. If you're new here, you're specially welcome. Before we begin, here's a question for you. Do you believe a person's greatest strength comes from what they can see, or from what they can overcome? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and enjoy today's story.
The bodyguards arrived 4 minutes later. 4 of them. Trained men, earpieces in. Hands already reaching for weapons as they sprinted into the alley. They stopped dead when they saw the scene. 3 men on the ground. Hands zip-tied with a strip from one of their own belts. Mirabelle standing calm and unhurt. And a blind woman with a white cane standing between the child and every threat in the world like she was born to do exactly that. The lead guard looked at Julie. Then at the men on the ground. Then back at Julie. He had no words. Mirabelle, he finally managed to ask. Are you okay? I'm fine, she replied, still staring at Julie. She saved me. He pulled out his phone immediately and called Xavier. Xavier Santos was not a man who showed shock easily. He had built one of the most feared organizations in the city from the ground up. He had walked into rooms where men twice his size trembled. He had faced situations that would break most people without blinking. But when his head of security described what had happened in that alley, Xavier went very quiet. Say that again, he said. A blind woman, sir. She took all 3 of them down before we arrived. Mirabelle is unharmed. Xavier didn't respond immediately. He set his phone down on the desk and stared at the wall. His daughter. His only child. Safe because a blind woman had stood between her and 3 armed men. He needed to meet this woman. Julie was walking down the grocery shop when the black car pulled up beside her. The window came down. A man leaned out. Miss Julie, he called out. She didn't stop walking. I don't know you, she said, not recognizing the voice. My name is Xavier Santos. You saved my daughter some night ago. She slowed. She's safe, Julie said. That's all that matters. I'd like to thank you properly. Name your price. Julie stopped. She turned toward him. I don't have a price, she said. Xavier studied her. She was composed in a way that unsettled him. Then let me drive you home, he politely requested. I know the way, don't worry yourself, Julie replied. And she walked off into the dark, cane tapping lightly against the pavement, until the sound faded and she was gone. Xavier sat back in the car. In all his years, he had never met someone who turned down anything he offered. His money, his car, his gratitude, and walked away without a single glance back. He needed to know who she was. Meanwhile, in the back seat beside him, Mirabelle had said nothing since they got in the car. She was staring out the window in the direction Julie had gone, her small fingers pressed against the glass. "Daddy," she said quietly. "Yes. I want to see her again." Xavier looked at his daughter. "We'll see," he said. But Mirabelle shook her head slowly, still watching the dark street. "I feel safer with her," she said. "More than with all your bodyguards." Xavier said nothing. Somewhere across the city, in a small apartment with no television and no noise, Julie sat by the window and listened to the night. 3 days passed before Mirabelle got her way. "I want to visit Julie." Xavier sent 2 of his men first to find out everything about the blind woman, who had walked away from his money without blinking. They came back with almost nothing. Julie lived alone in a modest apartment on the east side of the city. No family listed. No known employer. No record of formal training in any security or martial arts organization. She paid her bills. She kept to herself. She did not exist in any of the circles Xavier moved in. That bothered him more than he wanted to admit. He went with Mirabelle himself. Julie heard the car before it parked. She heard the doors open, heard the weight of footsteps, 2 sets, 1 light and fast, 1 measured and deliberate. She was already at the door when the knock came. "You knew we were here," Mirabelle said the moment Julie opened the door. It wasn't a question. She was looking up at Julie with bright, curious eyes like she was studying something rare. "You have loud shoes," Julie said. Mirabelle giggled. It was the first time she had laughed since the alley. Xavier noticed. They came inside. The apartment was clean and sparse. No clutter, no decoration except for a small framed photograph on a shelf near the window. Xavier's eyes moved to it immediately. A younger Julie smiling, standing beside a teenage boy who had her same mouth, her same jaw. Someone who looked like he meant everything to her. Xavier didn't ask about it. Not yet. Julie made tea without fumbling once. She moved through her kitchen with a confidence that continued to unsettle him. Every motion was deliberate. Nothing wasted. "You train somewhere," Xavier said, not as a question. "I learned what I needed to learn," Julie replied, setting a cup in front of him with quiet accuracy. "From who?" She smiled slightly. "People who understood that the eyes are the last thing you actually need." Xavier looked at her for a long moment. She wasn't going to give him a straight answer. He already understood that. She was the kind of person who shared only what she decided you had earned. Mirabelle, meanwhile, had already migrated to the floor beside Julie's chair, and was telling her about school with the ease of someone who had known her for years. Julie listened without interrupting. She asked questions at exactly the right moments. Xavier watched. He didn't say anything. They visited again the following week. Then the week after that. Mirabelle started calling ahead. She would pick up the phone and say, "Julie, we're coming today." And Julie would say, "I know you would." And Mirabelle would laugh every single time like it was the best joke in the world. But underneath the laughter, something else was building in Julie. Something she had kept locked away for a long time. Mirabelle reminded her of Brian. Not in looks. Brian had been a lanky, restless boy who could not sit still for 10 minutes. Mirabelle was nothing like that. But there was something in the way she trusted without reason. The way she walked into spaces and immediately made them feel inhabited. The way she reached for Julie's hand when she was telling a story. Like she needed that small anchor to keep the words coming. Brian used to do the same thing. Julie would be sitting in the dark, because darkness meant nothing to her, and she would feel that small hand find hers, and Brian's voice would fill the room, telling her about school, about a boy who said something stupid about a dream he had. He had talked so much. Too much, she used to think. Now she would give anything to hear it again. She never spoke of him. Not to anyone. But the memory lived in her body the way old injuries do. Quiet most of the time, then suddenly everywhere. Mirabelle didn't know any of this. But one afternoon she crawled onto the chair beside Julie and leaned her head against her arm and said, "You feel like someone who has been sad for a long time." Julie went still. "Why do you say that?" she asked. Mirabelle shrugged. "Because when I'm happy you smile. But it's a sad smile. Like you're happy and missing something at the same time." Julie said nothing for a moment. She reached out and rested her hand gently on top of Mirabelle's head. "You're very perceptive," she said quietly. "What does perceptive mean?" "It means you see things most people miss." Mirabelle considered this. "Like you," she said. Julie smiled. One evening after Mirabelle fell asleep on Julie's couch, Xavier sat across from Julie in the small room and asked, "You've lost someone before?" Julie asked. "Everyone has," she said gently. "Was it someone young?" Xavier asked. "Someone you felt responsible for?" She turned toward him very well. Don't, she warned quietly. Xavier held up a hand. I'm not pushing. I just want you to know. He kept shut and took in a sharp breath. I see it. Whatever it is you're carrying. Julie said nothing to him. Van had stopped by unannounced, as he often did to his brother. Xavier's younger brother. Trusted by everyone. Loved by Mirabelle. The man who smiled easiest and moved quietest through every room in Xavier's life. He stood in the doorway watching Julie. Watching the way Xavier leaned toward her. Watching the way Mirabelle slept peacefully on her couch. His expression didn't change. But one thing was certain to him about Julie, that she was his problem to his plans. Van had always been patient. That was his greatest weapon. He had been waiting for years. It started the day Mr. Suntus, their father, sat both boys down and told them what would happen when he was gone. Van was older. Van had worked harder in his own estimation. Van had sacrificed more. And yet the old man had looked between them and said Xavier's name. Just like that. Xavier. Van remembered the exact feeling. If he could not inherit it, he would take it. He just needed time. The second attack came one sunny afternoon. Mirabelle was leaving her music lesson, 2 guards flanking her, a car waiting at the curb. It should have been simple. It should have been safe. But the men who came this time were not like the 3 from the alley. These were organized. They moved in pairs. They had already disabled the cameras on that block 20 minutes before Mirabelle stepped outside. Julie had come to walk with her that day. Something in the sunny afternoon air had felt wrong to her. A tension she couldn't name but couldn't ignore. She had called ahead and said she would meet them there. The guards hadn't argued. They had learned by now not to argue with Julie. She heard them before she saw anything. 4 sets of footsteps closing from 2 directions. The shift in air pressure as a vehicle slowed without stopping. The small, almost imperceptible change in Mirabelle's breathing when the girl sensed something was wrong even before she understood what. Mirabelle, Julie said, her voice low and even. Come to me. Now. Mirabelle didn't hesitate. She crossed to Julie's side immediately. What followed was not elegant. It was not the clean, quiet efficiency of the alley. This was harder. These men were better. Julie took a hit across her left shoulder that sent real pain firing down her arm. She absorbed it, repositioned, and kept moving. She used the space around her the way she always did, not fighting blind but fighting with everything else. Sound. Weight. Breath. The way a man shifts before he throws a punch. The half-second of silence before an attack. 1 guard went down. Then 2 attackers. Then a third. By the time the backup arrived, it was over. Mirabelle was standing behind Julie, both arms wrapped around her from behind, face pressed against her back. I've got you, Julie said, breathing hard. I know, Mirabelle whispered. I always know. Thank you, she whispered. Xavier arrived in 8 minutes. He stood in the middle of the scene and looked at everything. The disabled cameras, the coordinated approach, the professionalism of the attack. This isn't random, he said. No, Julie said. It was never random. He turned to look at her. Her shoulder was bruised. She was holding herself slightly to one side to manage the pain. But her face was steady. Someone planned this, Xavier said. And it could be someone close to you planned this, Julie added. The air went heavy. Xavier stared at her. What are you saying? I'm saying the cameras were cut before we arrived. I'm saying these men knew exactly where Mirabelle would be and when. I'm saying whoever did this has access to your schedule, your routes, and your security rotation. She paused. That's not an outsider, Xavier. He said nothing, but the weight of it settled over him like something physical. An internal investigation began that night. His daughter's life has been danger 2 times, and he won't sit back and wait for another. Julie started paying attention differently after that. She had always been observant, but now she was hunting. She listened to every conversation that happened near her. She noticed the way certain silences landed, the way a room changed when specific people entered it. She tracked inconsistencies the way she tracked footsteps, by their rhythm, their weight, what they revealed without meaning to. Van came to Xavier's house 4 days after the second attack. He embraced his brother. He said all the right things. He was concerned. He was furious. He wanted whoever did this found immediately. Julie sat across the room and listened. And she heard it. A small thing. Almost nothing. When Xavier mentioned that the investigation was focusing on external contractors, Van exhaled. Just slightly. A breath released. Julie's grip firmed around her cane. She said nothing. But she began watching Van the way she watched everything else that posed a threat. quietly, completely, and from every angle at once. The elder advisor confirmed what she was already piecing together. An old man who had served Mr. Suntus for decades and trusted Julie in the way that very old people sometimes trusted those who listened more than they spoke. He told her about the succession. About how Van had stood in that room and smiled and said Xavier deserved it. About how, in the months that followed, small things began to go wrong in ways that could never quite be traced back to anyone. Julie listened to every word. Then she sat alone in her apartment that night and put it all together. Van wanted Xavier's position. Van had always wanted it. And his plan was not simply to challenge his brother. It was to break him. Take away the thing Xavier loved most. Destroy him from the inside. Then step into the wreckage and take what he believed was always his. Mirabelle was not just a target. Mirabelle was the weapon Van planned to use against her father. Julie stood up from her chair. She moved to the window and stood there, listening to the city. She had to tell Xavier. But she was already too late. Her phone rang at 6 in the morning. Xavier's voice on the other end was something she had never heard from him before. Stripped of everything. "Hello." "She's gone," he said. "Mirabelle is gone." Julie closed her eyes. "I'm coming," she said. She didn't wait for his men. She didn't wait for a plan. She already knew Van's patterns. She had been listening to him for weeks. The way he moved. The properties his name never appeared on but his habits pointed to. The direction his footsteps always came from when he arrived unannounced. She followed sound, scent, memory, instinct built over years of learning to trust what her body knew when her eyes could offer nothing. It took her 2 hours to find the compound. She went in through the east side, where the guards were rotated every 40 minutes and the gap between shifts was exactly 90 seconds. She counted the footsteps on the gravel. She mapped the interior by the echoes of her own movement. She took down the first guard without a sound, then the second, then the third. She found Mirabelle in a room at the back of the building. The girl was sitting upright on a cot, knees pulled to her chest, eyes red but dry. She had finished crying. She was waiting. When the door opened, Mirabelle looked up. "I knew it would be you," she whispered. "Come," Julie said, reaching out her hand. Mirabelle took it without hesitation. They were almost out when Van stepped into the corridor ahead of them. He looked at Julie with those calm, patient eyes of his. The smile was gone now. There was nothing left to perform for. "I underestimated you," he said. "Everyone does," Julie replied. He moved toward her. And Julie, with Mirabelle behind her, met him with everything she had. The pain in her shoulder screamed. She ignored it. She fought with the precision of someone who had spent years learning that strength was not about what you could see. It was about what you refused to surrender. Van was good. But Julie was something else entirely. He was still on the ground when Xavier and his men poured through every entrance of the compound at once. The truth came out in full that night. Van's communications. His payments. His instructions to every man who had come after Mirabelle. Xavier stood in the middle of it all and read everything in silence. His face did not change. But Julie, standing nearby, heard his breathing shift. Heard the exact moment the grief moved through him. Mirabelle sat wrapped in a blanket, watching her father. She didn't fully understand everything. But she understood enough. "Uncle Van did this?" she asked quietly. No one answered. The silence was answer enough. She didn't cry. She just pulled the blanket tighter and looked down at her hands. Van lost everything. Peace returned slowly. The way it always does after something breaks. Not all at once but in small pieces day by day. Mirabelle came back to Julie's apartment. She sat in the same chair she always sat in. She talked about school again. She laughed at the same jokes. But sometimes she went quiet in the middle of a sentence, staring at nothing, and Julie would simply sit beside her and wait. One afternoon Julie told her about Brian. She hadn't planned to. Came out quietly, the way true things do when the moment is finally right. She told Mirabelle about her brother. About how young he was. About the accident she had replayed in her mind 1,000 times. The one she believed for years she should have been able to prevent. About the silence he left behind that she had never fully learned to live in. Mirabelle listened the whole time without moving. When Julie finished, the girl reached over and took her hand. "It wasn't your fault," Mirabelle said. Such a simple sentence. But Julie felt it go somewhere deep. Xavier thanked her properly, finally, one evening when Mirabelle was asleep in the chair between them. Just with kind words. "You saved more than my daughter," he said. "You reminded me what it means to trust someone completely." Julie nodded slowly. One afternoon soon after, Mirabelle sat between them in the small apartment, sunlight coming through the window, The city quiet outside. She looked at Julie. She looked at Xavier. She smiled the way children smile when they feel completely, entirely safe. Now nobody can take me away, she said. Julie smiled. Xavier placed a hand gently on his daughter's shoulder. And for the first time in longer than either of them could remember, the room held nothing but peace.
Moral lesson. Never judge a person by what they lack. True strength is not measured by physical ability but by courage, character, and the willingness to protect others. Julie's blindness made many people underestimate her, but her greatest power was not her extraordinary senses, it was her selflessness, resilience, and determination to do what was right. The story also reminds us that betrayal often comes from those closest to us, while genuine family can sometimes be found in the most unexpected places. What part of Julie, Mirabel, and Xavier's story did you love the most? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe to Moon Soul Stories, and check out our channel for more emotional and inspiring stories.